Patrick Giles has made the most out of this opportunity for the Panthers as he looks to be the fourth line center come opening night. The roster is down to 42, and who's getting a look at Power Play 2? We discuss that more on today's Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Monday, September 30th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News. You can follow me on X at Bonoman12. Follow the show account on X and Instagram at @L_FLA Panthers. And shout out to the everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So, Panther fans, grateful to be back here on the show for another edition here as we are 8 days away from opening night. Kyle Okposo days away from opening night. And man, I know it's not officially October, but what we got as an appetizer yesterday and even continuing in today for all the sports that are going on, preseason hockey, along with game 162 yesterday. There's a doubleheader today for, mind you, to determine the last two wild card spots. Team USA winning their 10th straight President's Cup in golf too, and the Dolphins and the Panthers are in action tonight. So big sports month, even though it's not officially October, the best sports month out of the year, and then March and April right behind them as we are. There's no shortage of sports here in this month. But even prior to going into Friday night's game between the Florida Panthers and the Carolina Hurricanes in their home and home this weekend. First game, we're going to spend most of this first segment talking about the first game. Segment number 2, talk about the second game and who stood out. And third segment, we will discuss more about the roster cuts down to 42, who's reporting to Charlotte, who's still, if there might be someone on a PTO still around or not, but we are going to discuss all of that. A jam-packed show here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. But even prior to Friday's game between the Florida Panthers and the Carolina Hurricanes, there were a bit of roster moves and announcements as Justin Sourdif is week to week. Jesper Boquist moved up from the fourth line to the third, and Anton Lundell missed practice and was said that he would be playing on Saturday, which he eventually ended up playing. And Ken Appleby and Evan Cormier were released from their PTOs prior to Friday's game and will report to Charlotte. But Friday's game with Spencer Knight between the pipes, playing the first 40 minutes against a Carolina Hurricanes team that's mostly NHL players, mostly on that team, versus AHL guys mostly. And even Paul Maurice spoke about how nobody's getting a 10-year deal and nobody's getting a cut from the result of this game. It's crazy to think that he's mentioning 10-year deal, which the CBA doesn't allow that. But really, the only goal that I really put on Spencer Knight was that 6th goal on the PK, where going from to the left side under the glove, and other than that, great reading plays, but on the early stop on Seth Jarvis, where he got a piece of it and then it hit the post after that. And some of the goals that were given up on the night were tip-ins off rushes, redirections on if a forward was left to guard the blue paint, while the defense lost their fair share of board battles and were in a little bit of a scramble to get back in, and also getting on a rush that the D was a little backed up. And I'm talking about mostly of the play where Tobias Bjornfoot, instead of closing the gap, he was more back in his own zone instead of like putting a little bit of the body on it too. And maybe Mikola Svorka was a little bit lost there on the third one, where he screened Spencer Knight and didn't see it at all. So don't know where he was looking around, but he didn't know necessarily where to go. At least it didn't look that way. But we saw the difference as far as game speed with knowing them not knowing where everyone was. And you could see it on the 5th goal with Carrier getting it back to Jordan Staal as everyone had all eyes on Carrier there as he got the puck in the corner, and then the stretch from Gostisbehere to Andrei Svechnikov for the final goal right after a change. Panthers were standing a little bit still, and maybe it's a combination of being tired, but also not knowing the situation at hand for them, and just maybe the moment was a little bit too bright for them, as they're still, whenever you are in a training camp and also trying to make the team too, you might overthink a little bit of things, and then you might lose a little bit of that attention to detail. And obviously, and it looked that way for that very final goal that they gave up, which it was against Cooper Black, as he played the final 20 minutes too. But how this team was still able to be composed in the first 25 minutes, where shot blocks were 10-0 in favor of Florida. Obviously, when it comes to shot blocks, and if you have more, if the discrepancy is more on your side with the shot blocks, it means obviously the puck is in your zone more often, and it's really hard for them to break out. So for the Panthers and holding their own for the first 25 minutes, I was actually very pleased with that. A bright spot of this game too was seeing Mike Benning 2 primary assists, one of them on the power play, walking the blue line, getting that shot low for Okuliar. We spoke about Okuliar's pro experience and how it could translate to the NHL level, and also almost got a third point after the 2 primary assists, and almost got the third one, a third one via a goal on a 2-on-1 where him and Giles was going up the right wing. Chatfield had a good angle to block the centering feed, and Benning jumping on the play. And I'm really excited to see what his ceiling could be. Maurice spoke about him being undersized, how the technicalities of the game are what's going to be key to his development. And also, he's a 4th-round pick. It's going to be a slow process of guys who are NHL ready, who might get paid, who might leave, which, in the situation where the Florida Panthers are in with their contending window, you're going to see some guys who could be a stopgap, like the example of Nate Schmidt. You might see a guy who the Panthers might put a flyer, the Panthers are putting a flyer on, and that could end up in a possible extension. In the case of Adam Boquist, 24 years old, right-handed shot, when you're comparing that to the age of him versus Aaron Ekblad, because we still don't know what the future of him holds too. And so it just really depends on how Bill Zito kind of turns things over when it comes to the possibility of a youth movement here in South Florida, as there's going to be a little bit of that transition period over the next few years. But I also thought Ben Steves had a great few plays, where there was one on a breakout as a Carolina player was circling up, and he was quick to separate the puck to keep the cycle going. More on Steves later. And for this team, for the young players, dog days of the season. Maybe when you're down so much, and the avalanche of goals, no pun intended, where it's pouring on and on, where it's just not, obviously for the Panthers, they didn't respond how they did in Orlando, but for this, when you are out of the game, as far as the scoreboard, it's really in a regular season game, you're thinking maybe pack it up and get ready. But the great thing about training camp is that when you're fighting for a spot, you're still going at full speed ahead with your next shift. And also, Paul Murray spoke about how, when the guys are down, what is the conversation like on the bench? How are they talking to each other too? What are they saying about where the positioning is for these guys, and what they're saying to each other amongst that? And that's what happens when you go into a franchise that has that Stanley Cup pedigree for them. It's easier to respond knowing that there's so many job openings, where obviously there's still pressure for a team like the San Jose Sharks, who are rebuilding, and there are more roster spots, less veteran heavy too. But in the situation of the Panthers, like, you have to really, really fight for every shift. And the way that Murray said it was, when you get he said, quote, "When you get the 9th or 10th day of training camp, you see which guys are able to push through, and you look at them a little different too." Close quote. and also doing this a little bit with an injury early on in the game too, with Mackenzie Entwistle only playing 206 of the game, already down a center, and shifting up against an NHL ready roster. This is it was quite the difficult task, regardless of it, for the Panthers here too. But a few impressive performances there, so not too much to take out of the 6 goals from Spencer Knight, but still great bright spots in Patrick Giles, Ben Steves, Mike Benning. Those are the guys that really stood out for me in the game for the first one for the Florida Panthers here. But in segment number 2, we are going to discuss more about game number 2 of this home and home between the Florida Panthers and the Carolina Hurricanes. More about D-pair mix-ups, and also the conversation of Patrick Giles and the continuation of his progression as he is looking to be the 4th line center. We're going to discuss that more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. And Game Time has a feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even faster. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you how incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching for thousands of tickets. Game Time Picks, the curation makes it easier to save more on sports, comedy, concerts, theater, and more. With Seat Views, you get a panoramic view from your seat and in the app before you buy. It's the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONAHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDON NHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. And I'd like to thank you guys once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Monday, as we are wrapping up the month of September and we are full into October and full speed ahead into the season, as it is almost here. And I really can't wait for the ring ceremony, opening night against the Bruins, and even the game in Quebec City, where that was the place that the Panthers were rumored to move to. And it's going to be great for the Panthers to really stick it to the people there, as they are here to stay for a long time. For the Panthers in game number 2 of this home and home, more of an NHL lineup in this one, as the D pairs were a little mixed up with Nico Mikkola and Adam Boqvist on the second pair. Well, first pair in this one, but second pair as what we expect if they were to dress tonight for a regular season game. And Nate Schmidt and Dmitry Kulikov paired together in that one. And honestly, when you think about complementing someone's game with a stay-at-home defenseman versus a guy who's more to get in on the rush, who could move the puck a little more too, this looks more right for the Panthers to go with this. As I was scratching my head a little bit when I was seeing Dmitry Kulikov on the second pair to start the season and start of training camp. But hey, that's why you let training camp, develop and to see how things go from there. And only 3 guys played both games. The only ones who played both of them were Patrick Giles, Kai Schwint, and Oliver Okulier, both of them. Also with Okulier, dual eligibility with playing center, and also played wing on the first game and then shifted to center on that one. So just like how Patrick Giles, he plays on the right wing, and he could play, and he's developed his game to play more at center too. But it took a while for the Panthers to get their first shot on goal, and power play couldn't really get a cycle going, as the pair of Magna and Nas was a little slow to react after losing a war battle, protecting the net front. But guys who were outstanding in this one, Patrick Giles, a scoring chance with some nifty hands. Didn't score on that one, but then as the Carolina Hurricanes were breaking out, Ryan McAllister got the puck back to him, and then he was able to convert there for the Panthers to tie at 1. One of 2 primary assists for Ryan McAllister out of Western Michigan, a hockey factory over there, and the other one to get it to Wilmer Skoog to get it to 4-2 at the time. Panthers trailed as much as 4-1 in this one. Wilmer Skoog did speak about the benefit of playing with Giles and McAllister in Charlotte for a year, knowing that who they are on and off the ice, and really building in that chemistry. And also, let's talk about the progression of Patrick Giles not only in these last 3 years in Charlotte, but just going back to his freshman year at Boston College, where him and Spencer Knight played together. So freshman year at Boston College, he 6 points in 37 games. 2020, 5 points in 10 games. Obviously, that was the COVID shortened season. Everything in the world just was on hold for a lot of the time, including the NHL. OHL didn't have a whole season there. Let's not forget that. But half a point a game in those games too, with 5 points in 10 games there too. But then the progression really started to look more and more as it going up, with the very next year playing 24 games, having 12 points, 3 goals, 9 assists there, being more of a distributor in his junior year at BC too. But then the real explosion happened in 2022, where he had 15 goals and 7 assists. The goal scoring, he was more of a goal scorer that year, 22 points in 37. And then that same year, after finishing his time in Boston College, going to the Checkers, played 7 playoff games. He has 17 playoff games with the Charlotte Checkers under his belt, and going in on that AHL contract, and then earning himself a deal after his D camp and a rookie showcase too. Really, where he was then versus now, being an undrafted guy to maybe a guy who was not looked at much too, for the Panthers. Now he truly has the opportunity. We mentioned the injury to Entwistle. Tomas Nosek, he's not anywhere close to skating. So opportunity has come for Patrick Giles to be that 4th line center for him, and continuing on and on and on too with the Charlotte Checkers there for him. And even though it hasn't produced a half a point a game or more for him there, we're seeing what he can do with his foot speed, getting in on the forecheck, using his 6'4" frame to battle along the boards too. It's truly a development that is going in the right direction, and obviously a guy who could play valuable minutes on the penalty kill too. So he is definitely, for him, he's moving on up. Even Paul Maurice said, quote, he has moved up in the depth chart, close quote. So his words, he said it. So definitely a guy who is going in the right direction. Also, Sandis Velez scored a goal just like he did in Orlando a few days ago, and his shot, he's a 5th round pick, man. But man, does his shot look so much like Carter Verhaeghe. I mean, it's a younger one, smaller size, does need to mature a little bit in him. But the more I watch him, the more I'm seeing that his shot is a little bit hard to read there, and for him, bright future and great awareness by Evan Naus after the shot was blocked to quickly get the puck to him. I mean, for the last 2 goals that he scored, it looks like that there was going to be some type of break that the defense was going to break the puck out or deflect the centering feed, but Velez has left himself open to get those valuable scoring chances too. And also, even though Grayson Sachin didn't have the best start to the game, coughing the puck that resulted in the 2nd goal, but really saved the goal too on the hook on Jack Drury. But man, Jack Drury can skate, but great response later on in the game as he was strong on the forecheck. Nice strip that was when the game was tied at 4 to give Jonah Gadjevich a quality scoring chance. And speaking of Gadjevich, he's getting some quality PK time too, as you know, maybe as we spoke about dark horses on guys who will likely surprise a lot of people, and with Gadjevich getting being a year in the NHL roster, that is going to be truly helpful for him for his 6'2", 209 frame. A little bit on the smaller side with forwards, but for him, using that bulkiness of him too to also get suppress shots for the opposition too. And in this one, the momentum hadn't really shifted yet towards the Florida Panthers in this one when they attempted their comeback, which they won 5-4 in overtime. There was a lot of activation of the offense there for when the Panthers were bringing it up the ice. Gadjevich was ahead of the D, but also I love the IQ of Adam Boqvist, knowing that Gadjevich is ahead of the play, stretching it out and not dumping the puck, knowing that he can get it tape to tape, and then Gadjevich can still go with some speed there to make a chance too. And also, Chris Driedger in this one played the whole game, multiple saves, and multiple times that he had to stretch the right pad, having to go laterally left to right. One of them being when right before the Panthers tied the game at 4, and one midway through the third on the follow that went off the rebound. And then one of the final guys that I want to talk about, because we won't be talking about him for a while, and you'll see why in a bit. Hunter St. Martin. Primary assist on the game-winning goal by Jesper Boqvist. But before that, in the third period, multiple opportunities late in the third with stick lifts on Montgomery, which created a scoring chance for Jonah Gadjevich, and then a battle along the boards as Nico Mikkola was coming up the ice, and then a centering feed them for a drive and shoot for him too. And the defensive zone draw, we have to talk about it. And then coming up the ice, a little POP pass off the pads, and then before Jesper Boqvist scores, then and making the most out of his opportunity there too in the limited time that he was always going to get prior to returning to junior hockey too. So Hunter St. Martin is just great in the opportunity that he's gotten, and I can't wait to see him back again, even in development camp, rookie showcase, as he's on everyone's radar now too. And also Jesper Boqvist, we mentioned earlier in the show, moving up a line. The Panthers, their versatility with Swiss Army knives. So we talk about Erod, Luosterainen. The Panthers now have another one, and in Jesper Boqvist, with the opportunity of unfortunately the injury to Mackie Samoskevich, you have guys who could still shift up and down, and being a pro, which are the words of Paul Maurice, and having that experience, it really truly helps. As Panthers had to navigate injuries last season, it's been we spoke about so much about Ekblad and Montour on the D. Now it's flipped to the forward lines, as now there's conversation on what the Panthers are going to do during this time period of injuries and guys who are stepping up too. So Jesper Boqvist is yet another one who is going to be that Swiss Army knife that the Panthers are going to depend on too to start the season. And Doug Plagan says this every preseason, that the 23 guys that you are going to depend on opening night, you're going to need to dig a lot deeper that. So don't put too much stock into what the opening night roster looks like, as exciting as we get, because that whole it takes a village for an NHL roster. You are going to need more of those. And as the Panthers get healthier, hopefully the things line up more of what we projected to be for the start of the season. But we're going to transition over to segment number 3, where we're going to discuss some of the roster moves for the Panthers, as they have trimmed the roster down to 42 players, who is being sent back to junior, who is being sent to Charlotte, and who is getting a chance at Power Play 2. We're going to discuss that more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you can place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Once again, you could get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you've placed your first $5 bet. And you could do that all at FanDuel.com. Third and final segment here on this Monday, September 30th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Monday. And the following players have been assigned to AHL Charlotte, as the roster is now down to 42 players. So John Leonard, Aidan McDonough, and Ben Steeves are the forwards who have been sent down, while defensemen Merrick Alsher, Mike Benning, Evan Nouse, and Zachary Ewens have been assigned to AHL Charlotte, while Hunter St. Martin and Grayson Sachin have been sent back to their junior clubs. And also, Matt Luff was a little bit of a question this morning with the Panthers putting out their initial roster and not seeing Matt Luff up there on there, and no announcement from the team. But then just an hour later, the Charlotte Checkers announced their training camp roster, and Matt Luff was on there. So even before Paul Maurice spoke to the media, you put 2 and 2 together about Matt Luff being released from his PTO and now getting a chance to fight for a spot in Charlotte, as it's going to be going to create more of the AHL depth. So these are the roster players, the bubble roster players that I consider bubble roster players right now, even though some of them I think their chances are higher than the other. So here are the ones that I consider: Jonah Gadjevich, Zach Dalpe, Wilmer Skoog, Patrick Giles, Mackenzie Entwistle, Josh Davies, Will Lockwood, Rasmus Asplund, Ryan McAllister, Oliver Coulier, Sandis Vilmanis, and Kai Schwint. The rest of the guys of the forwards, if you see that, if I didn't name them, I think that they will be on the opening night roster. Defensemen, the bubble roster players that I still consider of what is left here: Tobias Bjornfoot, Matt Kierstead, Jacob Megna, Uvis Belinskis, Nathan Steos, and McAllister Hovorka. And some of them with NHL experience in Tobias Bjornfoot and pro hockey experience with McAllister Hovorka. Those guys have a little bit of an upper hand. And, of course, Uvis Belinskis. And speaking of Uvis Belinskis, he's getting a chance at Power Play 2 tonight for the Florida Panthers, giving, as we saw Nate Schmidt with being on the second power play unit just a few days ago, and now we are seeing another opportunity for another player, as there's still a little bit of question marks on what the final roster is going to look like for opening night. Well, we know that Nate Schmidt is going to be part of the team, but the fact that we are seeing Uvis Belinskis and getting a little bit of Power Play 2 on a night where the Panthers are going to put mostly an NHL ready roster on the ice tonight, which the top 6 is going to be your normal top 6 in the Barkov line and the Bennett line, while the bottom 6 is going to be mostly of guys who are still fighting. So what to look for tonight? Bottom 6, Power Play 2 for how Uvis Belinskis conducts it. So I know I just listed Uvis Belinskis as a bubble roster player, but his chances of making it obviously are higher than the other guys, with still a lot of question marks with guys who have made these few rounds of this latest round of cuts of Justin Zorda, Mackie Semiskevich, Tomas Nosek, and Matt Gusta. Those guys are there for as question marks because of their injury situation. And even Paul Maurice spoke about how there's going to be a lot of bodies in camp that are more banged up than guys who are healthy. And I'm paraphrasing that, but obviously exaggerating a little bit too on where everything stands too with their roster. And obviously what you can expect is not for these guys to you can't expect these guys to not try, at least the top guys, but you with what has happened, we spoke about the injuries a few days ago on Thursday, and then but there's also another injury going on in the National Hockey League with Patrick Laine. Took a knee-on-knee collision this weekend in a game between the Canadiens and the Leafs, and this is what you also have to worry about too in a game like this, that you get guys ready, but you guys get them healthy. And what's the happy median too for the amount of preseason games for that veteran players have to play, because you can't just put guys out there who haven't had game action, even if they're veterans, and then put them in on an opening night roster. But then what does that do for the young guys who are still fighting for spots? And this is the fun part about the preseason, and just looking at how guys have looked at the beginning versus how they progressed too, because we were not talking about Patrick Giles too much at the early part of the preseason, but opportunity has really came about for him, and for him to grab it and run with it, at least for now, until Nosek gets healthier for him too. But also going into this matchup for the Florida Panthers in this one, for them. So for the Panthers and getting the in the goaltending, but Bob looks to be the starter here. Looks like that he's going to get a full 60, and also for Bobrovsky, you're looking to at least get his legs going, and for him, more than a week off after that Nashville doubleheader, which we've seen many times throughout the regular season. That if you see a little bit of a Saturday game, and then you see like a 3 or 4 day gap in between that and another game, you'll sometimes see a lot of times where Paul Maurice will put the backup in on that very next game, so that you could strategically give Bobrovsky a full week off, and he's still fresh. So the fact that he's managing it kind of like that too, it's you got Paul Maurice is very, and it's not necessarily Paul Maurice deciding it completely. It's a great communication between him and Robbie Tallis on how everything is going to be conducted, so that he can remain ready for the season. And obviously, even if he doesn't play the rest of the preseason, and even doesn't play tonight, that his preparation is just absolutely top notch for him too, going into any game too. The Lightning, as the Panthers will face the Lightning tonight at 7 p.m. from Amerant Bank Arena, they're going with a mostly NHL lineup too in this game, as the Panthers will be playing the next 2 games against the Lightning tonight from Amerant Bank Arena, and Wednesday night from Amalie Arena, as we are looking one step closer into how the opening night roster will look. But that's going to do it for today's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. Tomorrow we will be back here on the show to recap tonight's game between the Florida Panthers and the Tampa Bay Lightning. But in the meantime, if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone and Steve Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez, signing off. And you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're your team every day.